Okay, guys. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the first two questions and kind of help you out on these first two to give you an idea of what you're going to expect on the homework here on 7.1. So on number 4 and 5, it says here, a teacher's making multiple copies of a one-page homework assignment. The time it takes her in seconds is 2 times the number of copies she needs to make plus 3. So what we want to do is, before we answer the question here on number 4 of what does the 3 represent in this scenario and then what does the 2 represent, I want us to find out what are our two quantities that we're comparing. And so if you notice here, you're comparing copies and you're comparing that to the time that it makes or that it takes her to make those copies. So you have to figure out, well, which one depends upon the other one. So it's either copies is dependent upon time or time is dependent upon copies. And in this case, we have time. Time is going to be the dependent variable, so dv, and that is dependent upon your number of copies that you are going to want to make. So if you put in, like in the copy machine or at home, you want to do 10 copies, well, it's going to take X amount of time. So the time it's going to be longer depending on the number that you input into the machine. So number of copies is going to be the independent variable right there. So let's see. It's got quite a bit of information here. It says that it's 2 times the number of copies. Well, we know now that copies is going to be X, and it's 2 times the number of copies that she has. And then it tells us right here that plus 3. So plus 3. So what we have here is the time it takes, and time is going to be Y. It's 2 times the number of copies plus 3 is going to be our equation. So I'm just going to write that here first. Y equals 2x plus 3. Now remember, x represents the number of copies right here. Here's x, number of copies. Y represents your time. And so it's 2 times the number of copies plus 3. So what do we think the 3 represents in this problem? So in this problem, we have our 3, and then we also have our 2. So the 3, we got to figure out what does the 3 represent, and then what does the 2 represent? Well, it tells us that the time it takes her in seconds is 2 times the number of copies. So basically, we have here that the 2 represents how many seconds to make one copy. So you scan the image, 2 seconds go by, 1 copy comes out. You want to do 2 copies, you scan the image, 2 seconds later, a copy comes out, another 2 seconds later, a second copy comes out. But now we got to figure out, what does this 3 represent? So what does the 3 represent in this problem? And it's a one-timer. It happens only one time. So it doesn't matter if you would have done, let's say, 100 copies, or if you do 50 copies, you're always going to have this additional 3. And so what exactly does that 3 represent in this particular problem? And so we talked about in class in a couple of periods that 3 represents basically the time to scan. So it's going to represent your time to scan the image, the original copy. Or maybe the warm-up of the machine, okay? But it's probably going to be to scan the image. It takes 3 seconds to scan the image and then 2 seconds for every copy that you want to come out. All right, so on number 5, it says, what is the total number of seconds it takes for the teacher to make 1 copy, 2 copies, 3 copies, and so on? So what I want to do up here now is that's where I want to put here 1 copy, 2 copies, 3 copies. So kind of made our table. And so for 1 copy, we would plug that into our equation. So we have our 2x plus 3, y is total time. And so I would just substitute, that's 2 times 1 plus 3. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3, we got 5. So we have 5 seconds. If it was 2 copies, it would be 7 seconds. If it was 3 copies, you would substitute the X here for 3 is what it would become. So 3 times 2 is 6 plus 3 is 9. So it'd be 9 copies. And so what I want to ask you now is, let's answer this question. The question that it says right here is, by how many seconds does the total time increase for each copy? And so if you notice here, every time that you go up a second, you notice here that the time increases. So for every plus 1 copy, it increases 2 seconds. So for this one, it's going to be that you have 2 seconds for every copy. Is what you have. You have some other questions on here. For example, number 6 says represent the relationship below between the number of copies made and the time in seconds in the table below. Well, we actually already started that right up here. So anyway, I hope 4 and 5 here are going to help you to begin to do the other ones. Remember, always ask yourself, what am I comparing in the problem? And then try to make a table. Tables totally help you out. So I hope that was helpful.